Their last Premier League win was back on October the 5th. 9 points back. Are we in a situation here where we're in a two-horse race already?
I think you'd rather be chasing down Liverpool than City. It's hard to see Liverpool so early in Slopp's tenure continuing to be this winning machine.
I think Arteta needs to kick his team into gear. They need to start winning games again. Otherwise, they are going to fall too far off the pace if they're not already there.
We should mention the goalkeeper. He's got to save that at the near post, Robert Sanchez. And I think if they want to be taken seriously in terms of a title challenge, then they really need a proper top-level number one.
Sanchez isn't particularly amazing with his feet. He's made mistakes in that regard. He's not massively commanding, and he just isn't a goalkeeper that gives you a lot of confidence as a defensive unit.
This Postecoglou outfit are the football version of Instagram versus reality, aren't they?
But this is Tottenham. You know, this is what we do, mate, to quote the manager. They give teams head starts, particularly at home, and if you keep doing that, eventually you're going to lose. I don't see them as trophy challengers. I don't see that in terms of results, they've made that much progress under Postecoglou.
They are very difficult to watch. This was the 13th time in 15 league games this year that they have gone 1-0 down at home.
But you also wonder about the players that he has, because that doesn't feel like a strong enough squad, but they're just not quite there yet. It feels like a squad that needs a couple more transfer windows.
Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access. What a way to close the first quarter of the season. Let's discuss it all in the company of Alex Crook. Kevin Hatchard is here as well. City lose, Liverpool walk on, Arsenal drop points for the fourth time in 4 Premier League games. So Kev, is it all over and you're planning your title celebrations?
Not quite. As you know, I tend towards the pessimistic as a fan, but I'm pleasantly surprised by how consistent they've been under Arne Slot. It's a nice little mix of the old and the new, I think, at Liverpool at the moment.
Crook, the November international break is upon us and the chopping block is ready. Any rumbles?
Well, a few. I think there's a few managers who are going to be hiding from their phones over the course of the next couple of weeks. Bad weekend again for Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace. Much needed victory for Gary O'Neill, so I think that will buy him more time. But what does it mean for Russell Martin? The rumblings about Steve Cooper never seem to go away. And then you look at Everton. I thought they were really poor again at West Ham at the weekend. And when you speak to Sean Dyche, just his body language, I think he knows that at some point the call will come once Friedkin gets his feet under the table.
England play on Thursday. It's a big game. They take on Greece. There might be a few pullouts between now and then. Trent Alexander-Arnold came off with an injury, which looks like it might rob him of a place in the squad. Rice, Saka and Palmer all looking a little bit dicey after the game that Crook and I were at yesterday. Kev, a lot of people are talking about the Nations League as if it doesn't matter, but it does, doesn't it? Because if Thomas Tuchel walks in the door and he's got to negotiate a Nations League playoff before he can get stuck into World Cup qualifiers, that's just not on the agenda for him.
Yeah, and I think it is important in general. I think for an elite nation, if you like, if that's how you want to describe England, although obviously in the Nations League, not quite at the moment, it is generally okay because you're going to qualify for major tournaments anyway. But you look at some countries like Scotland, they've really made best use of the Nations League. It's been hugely beneficial to them in terms of qualifying for major tournaments. And I think you have got this situation now where actually when the Nations League first came in, I think a lot of people were quite enthusiastic about it. And I think we thought, instead of these friendlies where you get 6, 7, 8 changes, you're actually getting proper games with real intensity that matter. Some of the minnows are really enjoying it. I think it's turning a bit now. I think you're getting more of a backlash. You're getting more players pulling out. You're getting more players thinking, well, actually, I can swerve this. So I think it's moving into a new phase where actually some teams and some players aren't quite taking it as seriously as they once did.
Yes, interesting. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days because England play Greece, they need to win, and they play Ireland, and they need to win that one as well. Crook, I take it, as it's international break and there's a shard of sunlight across your face. You're either already or on your way to sunnier climes, because we know what you like.
Well, it depends if you count Presby Park as sunnier climes. I'm off to Cheltenham for a couple of days at the end of the week, but yes, I will then be boarding a flight to Portugal for a little bit of winter sun on Sunday.
Of course you will. Of course you will. Right, so much to get into from the weekend. Let's get on to the action starting at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea up to third, but this is an Arsenal story, isn't it, really? They haven't won a Premier League game since Rishi Sunak was leader of the opposition. Line judges still had a job at Wimbledon. City were in good form, and Lee Carsley still had a chance of being the England manager. Their last Premier League win was back on October the 5th. 9 points back. Crook, how do they claw it back?
Difficult, although I think you'd rather be chasing down Liverpool than City at this moment in time, because it's hard to see Liverpool so early in Slott's tenure continuing to be this winning machine they've come into. But they are winning games almost in third gear at the moment. I don't think they were overly taxed again against Villa at the weekend. So it's a concern. I think I heard a stat last night, the last 5 times that a team have been 9 points clear, 11 games into a Premier League season, they've gone on to win the title. So the onus is really there for Liverpool. I think Arsenal's issue was laid bare. It's easy to say with hindsight, but it's not hindsight. We were saying it in the summer. That lack of a number 9 is a problem. I thought Henry Winter's piece on the talkSPORT website was really interesting when he pointed out the standard of clubs against whom Kai Havertz has scored this season. He is a flat track bully. He doesn't come up with the goals in a big moment, and it probably would have been ruled out anyway. But you look at that incident in the last few seconds when Trossard takes the ball off the toe of Kai Havertz, that sort of sums up where Arsenal are as an attacking force. They look better going forward with Ødegaard in the team, and obviously he set up the goal, but they were still wasteful.
Yeah, it was all very even, but there was a chance right at the end for Havertz, and I think that the reaction showed you just how much he felt that was a key moment in the game. It was the last kick of the game, and I thought he was going to cancel Leandro Trossard for getting involved in that. I mean, he was absolutely outraged. I mean, look, I understand in an Arsenal shirt, he may well have been in that category of sort of sticking the ball in the net against the opponents you expect him to, but to say that he's a flat track bully, which I think is your words, not Henry's words. I haven't read the piece, but I'm guessing that was you and not Henry. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I might be. He's a little bit contrite, bearing in mind that he scored the winning goal in a Champions League final against Manchester City for Chelsea, who weren't very happy to see him, by the way, after what he said about winning something with Arsenal would mean more than winning that particular trophy. But even though City have lost their last 4 in all competitions, are we in a situation, they've got a major injury crisis as well, and Pep is on mind games already, and we've only got to the middle of November. Are we in a situation here, Kev, where we're in a 2-horse race already?
No, I don't think we are. I wouldn't write off Arsenal just yet. I understand the debate about a proper number 9, if you like. But I think it's quite clear that's not what Arteta wants. He doesn't feel that fits with the style. He doesn't feel that that player would necessarily do what he wants with and without the ball. And so he wants to do it in a different way. If you look at how much they concentrate on out-of-possession play, a centre-forward like an Osimhen, for example, wouldn't necessarily do that same job. Obviously, they'd bring you positives in another way, but that's the judgment Arteta has to make. I actually think the bigger issue and the bigger error was not having a like-for-like replacement, not the same quality, but the same profile, for Ødegaard. Emile Smith-Rowe was allowed to leave the club. I understand why. He wanted regular first-team football. He's blossoming at Fulham. But to let Fabio Vieira go as well, that seems a bit negligent. I don't understand why you would allow both of them to go at the same time. So I thought Ødegaard made a massive difference. I thought the ball to Martinelli for the goal was excellent. I thought he had some really nice moments in the game. It just makes a huge difference. And Arteta rightly praised him after the game and said, I'd said to the other players, look what he could do 6 weeks out, and yet he comes back and performs like that. So that, for me, is a bigger issue than them not having a traditional centre-forward.
That drawing of 3 players into his sort of orbit as he's got the ball just before he sends it over the top to Martinelli. I was screaming at Crook, who was sitting next to me, as the ball went to him, saying, look at the far post, there's so much space, there's so much... there it is. It was obvious it was going to happen. Listen, and you talk about number 9s. Well, the truth is, I don't think Pep Guardiola really likes the idea of having a number 9. It's only because it's Erling Haaland that he's quite happy to accept it. I think these are 2 coaches that would actually rather play with more of a sort of attacking midfield player, more of someone who's going to drop deep and link the play, more than just a one-trick goal-scoring machine at the front of their formation. If they were honest, that they've got Forest at home when they come back from the international break, then they've got to go away to Sporting very quickly afterwards. Away at West Ham, who by that stage might have made a change. I don't know, maybe. Manchester United away, who certainly will have made a change. So the next few weeks are going to be a bit difficult for Arsenal, and it has been a difficult middle part of this first quarter of the season. So I think Arteta needs to kick his team into gear. They need to start winning games again. Otherwise, they are going to fall too far off the pace if they're not already there. Chelsea, though, have lost just 2 Premier League games. They aren't playing brilliantly, actually, now, but I think the break comes at the right time for them. They go to Leicester after the international break. They've got Villa at home, then Saints, Spurs away. I'd suggest if you look at their Christmas fixtures, their schedule, Crook, is one of the lighter ones. Might we be talking about them as possible challengers by the time we get to the new year?
Well, I tried to get both Mark Cucurella and Enzo Maresca to bite on that after the game, and neither did. Cucurella pointed out that teams like Arsenal were obviously a lot further ahead in their development. Maresca actually admitted that probably Chelsea have overachieved at the start of the season compared to where they were in the summer. Again, I think we said it before the game, if you keep Cole Palmer quiet, then you do quell them from an attacking perspective, and they are a team who always give you chances. I know that you're maybe not the biggest fan of Levi Colwill. You think he dives in a bit and maybe could work on his positioning. So I think defensively they've got problems, and we should mention the goalkeeper. He's got to save that at the near post, Robert Sanchez. And I think if they want to be taken seriously in terms of a title challenge, then they really need a proper top-level number one.
That is true. Kev, go on.
No, I was just going to say I completely agree. I think Robert Sanchez is a player that if you have ambitions to be challenging for trophies, I don't think he's a goalkeeper that you can retain. I find it bizarre that they brought in Jurgensen from Villarreal, who'd had a really good season in La Liga, and he's the backup goalkeeper who plays in the Conference League. I just don't understand it. Sanchez isn't particularly amazing with his feet. He's made mistakes in that regard. He's not massively commanding, I don't think, and there is a fragility there, and I agree with Crookie. I think he should have been a lot stronger in that situation. I think his positioning was wrong, and he just isn't a goalkeeper that gives you a lot of confidence as a defensive unit, and there are gaps in that defensive unit, and it does need a more commanding player. So that is certainly an area that I think they need to focus on going forward.
Yeah, I think that rather than fragility, I would say that there is sort of an erratic nature to the way he plays, because he just makes decisions which you think you're putting yourself and everybody else in a bundle of trouble by making that move. And he does it on the regular. The league under the leaders is really fascinating, Kev, isn't it? Because Manchester United and Chelsea, they're 10 places apart in the table. United 13th, Chelsea 3rd, yet they're separated by just 4 points. It's a highly competitive league and compelling as well, because Liverpool actually, and we'll get to them a little bit shortly, before the FA Cup kicks in, face Real Madrid before they face Manchester City. They've got Newcastle away, Everton away, Fulham who've been brilliant, a League Cup quarter-final before they go to Tottenham, and they face Manchester United, who'll have Ruben Amorim in tow by that stage. I think there still might be a bit of levelling out to be done as far as the table is concerned. And actually, everyone still is within striking distance.
Yeah, loads of twists and turns. And I think what you're seeing as well is the impact of injuries. I think, some teams have such stacked schedules, like you've just said, with Liverpool. So you are going to get lots of shifts. You are going to get lots of changes. You are going to get players as well that take a while to kick in. Isak is a great example at Newcastle. He didn't look the same player in the opening weeks of the season. Now he's starting to score a few goals. So I do think the impact of injuries is going to be big. I think there are a lot of teams that are on a similar level, to be honest. And I think a team like Chelsea, for example, you can see the idea, you can see how they're developing. And look, if you sign 50 players, eventually you're going to find the best 25 and you're going to work it out. So I think they're getting there in that regard. I think Maresca seems to have more authority. Maybe that's unfair on previous coaches, but there seems to be a bit more gravitas about him. Maybe he seems to have been given
authority
this idea
or
that he
autonomy?
can. Yeah, or maybe both, to be honest, because I do think that's important at a club like Chelsea because there's a lot of voices above and below, and so I do think you need that. You need that feeling that, look, it's not quite Unai Emery domination that you get at Villa Park, but you need that idea that, look, I'm the main man. I make these big decisions. There are some really big players that I'm going to leave out altogether. He seems to have the freedom to do that at the moment.
Okay, rattle on because we've got a lot to get through. We'll come to Unai Emery in just a second and whether or not actually he should have taken more charge of one particular situation in the next few minutes. Let's focus on Tottenham. They were beaten at home by Ipswich. Congratulations to Ipswich, first of all, because it's their first win of the season. They certainly have been getting better. They deserve a little bit of praise here. But let's focus on Tottenham because they are really the story, Crook. They beat City in the Cup. They knock Villa over easily. They go to Turkey and defend like peak Aussie Ardiles years and then lose to a team who haven't won a game for the second time in 3 weeks. This Postecoglou outfit are the football version of Instagram versus reality, aren't they?
That's a brilliant way of putting it. But I'm not shocked. I think you said in a WhatsApp group we're in, if Radu Dragusin plays, don't rule out Ipswich, and you don't want to pick out one player on the back of a defeat. But it is a problem, isn't it, when they haven't got Van der Ven there alongside Romero. Dragusin looks like someone who's really devoid of confidence. I thought he was really poor in Turkey in midweek as well. But this is Tottenham. You know, this is what we do, mate, to quote the manager. They give teams head starts, particularly at home. And if you keep doing that, eventually you're going to lose. You're not going to be able to keep coming from behind. I said it on the show I did with Jim and Troy on Friday, got a bit of stick from Spurs fans. I don't see them as trophy challengers. I don't see that in terms of results, they've made that much progress under Postecoglou. Yes, they're great fun to watch, probably more for a neutral, actually, than a Tottenham fan, because it was comical at times in Turkey. But I don't see them finishing the top four, and I don't see them lifting silverware. So are they any further down the line with this manager than they have been with people like Pochettino and even Antonio Conte?
Well, the great Glenn Hoddle was working with me on Thursday, and as we got up out of our seats after doing that game against Galatasaray, I slapped him on the back. I said, Glenn, that was fabulous. He went, yeah, for you. And that sort of summed it up, really, because if you're a Tottenham fan, they are very difficult to watch. This was the 13th time in 15 league games this year that they have gone 1-0 down at home. The issue here is that a year on from Postecoglou taking over, Kevin, their wildly fluctuating form means that Postecoglou actually is a hard manager to assess. Is he a big success that has breathed new life into Tottenham? Because at one stage, the Tottenham fans were all talking about the feels and the vibe and the energy that he brought when he breezed in the door. Or is he struggling to motivate this group? Because what did he say afterwards? I'm not consistently getting performance out of them. And that's what he's got to do, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I think the first stage of this was to bring a bit of joy back to the fans because it was so sombre and awful under Conte towards the end that they weren't enjoying the football. They weren't, looking forward to games. And that's effectively what we're all in here for, really. So, look, the first bit was the entertainment. Fine. Then comes the more tricky bit, which is to find consistency and have the humility to slightly tweak things. You don't want to bin the whole game idea, but you have to find a way of being tougher to play against, tougher to score against. And that is a real problem. Crookie's absolutely right. If you keep going a goal down at home, you're not going to be able to come back in the way they did against Villa every time. I was surprised they were able to do that. I was surprised Villa collapsed in the way that they did. But you also wonder about the players that he has, because that doesn't feel like a strong enough squad. It doesn't feel like a squad that it has attacking quality and it has some improving players in midfield, but they're just not quite there yet. It feels like a squad that needs a couple more transfer windows just to get it to where it might be under Postecoglou. I think they've got to stick with him, but he's got to change the way he behaves after games because it isn't doing him any favours. It isn't doing the club any favours. And
look, we've mentioned this for a year now.
But is it kind of performance art, or is it just how he is as a guy? I don't understand game and post-game, why they're so different. It's so
Well,
odd.
I mentioned it to on the podcast the other week that I think what I've been told is that he's so desperate not to be seen as sort of an Australian caricature. He doesn't want to be Jesse Marsh too. He doesn't want people to throw the sort of Australian Ted Lasso thing at him. So he tries to sort of not be the playful, happy character and tries to be serious. That's what I've been told. It doesn't come across very well. And Mark Scott on Match of the Day has had two rather difficult exchanges with him in a couple of weeks. I know Crook and I have both had interesting exchanges with him as well over the last year. And in the end, that sort of erodes people's view of you if you keep coming across in this manner. I think that's a problem for him. Someone needs to somehow sort of steer him away from. I thought actually he'd started to sort of jettison that, but it just keeps coming back every time they have a bad result. I know he feels it badly, but at the same time, you've got to present your front of house of Tottenham Hotspur. You've got to present yourself a little bit better than that. The other issue I have is this sort of idea, and Crook and I discussed this on the Sunday session, that coaches nowadays, we've got a new breed of coaches, or we've got a new group of coaches that believe that there is one way and one way only to win football matches, and it's their way. And if you have a philosophy, you have to play it even if it's not working, because you've got to play through it, do it better until it properly works. When actually, football for many years has been won and lost by good managers being intelligent enough to spot the weaknesses in the opponents, adjust slightly, and also adjust slightly to their strengths as well. You have to be able to adapt. Otherwise, actually, you're not a proper rounded coach, in my opinion. Crook?
I agree, and actually, I think if you are so stubborn in your philosophy, and then you go on a winless run, you can quickly lose players. You know, if they don't believe that your philosophy is going to get positive results, they're not going to stay with you for very long. I remember speaking to players at Bournemouth when Gary O'Neill was in charge, and one of his big strengths then was that he would tailor his plan every week to negate the opposition's strength. Now, the fans didn't particularly like that, I've got to say, because they thought it was a bit of a negative way of going about it. But it brought success. He kept them in the league when maybe others would have taken them down. But even he this season, at the start of the campaign, he tried to change what he was doing at Wolves to become a more attack-minded team. And obviously, I know they had difficult fixtures, but they weren't winning games. So he's had to revert to plan B. I know you were talking this morning, again, in a WhatsApp group about Fabian Hertzler and the fact that, yes, he has a style, but he has the ability to be adaptable during games. And I thought it was interesting listening to Ruben Amorim last night after his final Sporting game. He was saying, yes, I've got a certain way I want to play, but we're not going to be able to do that straight away with this squad. And that encouraged me, because managers do need different ideas to win different games.
But that's why I was always positive about Arteta, because Arteta came in and played a style of football that he didn't want to play. I spoke to him after they'd won the FA Cup final, and he said, we can't keep playing like this, which was basically 10 men behind the ball, waiting for a counter-attacking opportunity and then nicking a goal on the break. And he didn't want to do it. He said, I don't want to play football like this. I remember the quote. He said, I don't want to do this. But he had to, because that's what he had at his disposal at that time. I think having an overarching great football philosophy, see Guardiola, is great. However, you've got to have the ability just to tweak and to change it, to tailor yourself towards whatever is the situation that you're in. Anyway, Solanke, I thought was a good acquisition. I do like him. I think he made a massive impact on Thursday when he came off the bench. I think he looks like a very good, lean, fast, hungry, fit striker, and I think there's big things coming his way. And when you think, I mean, Kev will tell us, I don't think Harry Kane had a great weekend this weekend, but I think there's might be a little bit of pressure there from Dom Solanke by the time we get to the early part of next year. I think he might be the next one off the rank, especially bearing in mind that Ali Watkins has gone 5 games without a goal. They can't be as mentally fragile, though, as they were after his goal was ruled out. Ipswich, one thing they have got, Kev, goals. Southampton haven't got Delap, who got 5 and 6 in the Premier League, or Sammy Schmodix, who can do an overhead kick like that.
Yeah, it was a brilliant finish, that overhead kick. Really well judged. I love Delap. I think he's great. So direct, so strong, but has a real eye for goal, clinical, and gives you a reference point in attack. You absolutely need that. So I think he does give them a real opportunity, and they've been digging out draws. They do make a lot of mistakes defensively. That's the thing that would concern me. And that's not about game idea. That's not about a coach tweaking things. That's just about not doing boneheaded things in defence. But I actually think there's real potential there. So, yeah, that's a huge win for them because it stops everybody talking about when are you going to get that first win, when's it coming. It just gives them a real boost ahead of the international break.
Okay, let's get into Saturday night's game. I was at Anfield for Liverpool, who beat Aston Villa. It means that Arne Slot has now won 15 of 17. Wow. Well, Kev, we'll give you the opportunity to wax lyrical about Arne Slot in just a second. Liverpool patient and potent, I thought. But if you spend all that money, Crook, on a set-piece coach and your opponents score from your corner and then 5 minutes later nearly do so again, I suggest if you're Unai Emery, you'll be asking for just a little bit more of an explanation as to how this has happened.
Yeah, although I think if you look at the success Villa have had from set pieces, probably dating back a couple of seasons now, I think he's got credit in the bank. It was a poor goal to concede, and it got the referee out of jail, didn't it, that Darwin Núñez actually managed to finish it, because I think that probably would have been a red card in other circumstances. I did like a message sent to Max Rushton on the warm-up yesterday that said, well, you can't send somebody off for denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity if the opposition score a goal, which exactly. I guess is factually correct.
Well, it is. It's exactly why he couldn't be sent off, because he didn't deny a goal-scoring opportunity, because they scored. But the other issue here, which Crook knows because we've been talking about it privately, is that David Coote didn't think it was a foul. He didn't give a foul. He was not playing advantage. He just didn't think it was a foul, which is a real concern, because he made a huge mistake down at West Ham when he took someone's advice rather than doing what he should have done, which was completely ignore the idea of giving a penalty. He's come back 2 weeks later after being sat out of the games, and he's come back, and I mean, it could have been an absolute howler. I mean, he should have played the advantage. He should have played the advantage. The game should have been allowed to continue, but then he should have gone back and he should have booked Bailey for a cynical foul. But it was just a number of decisions that were baffling on Saturday night. You know, Watkins diving in the box, not getting a yellow card for that. He played on when the assistant referee was furiously flagging for offside over on the far side, and the Liverpool players were like, what are you doing? And then, of course, there was the shirt pulling in the box. Should Pau Torres have had a penalty, Kev?
I can see why it would be given, but I can see why it wouldn't. I think it's right on the edge of what's sustained holding and what isn't, and that's now part of the lexicon. That's what they're looking at now. How long have you held people for?
Kev?
Oh, I know. I know. I mean, they make it so complicated. I mean, ultimately, I've always thought if you've got a big hunk of somebody's shirt and you're pulling them, that's a foul. It is a foul because you're affecting what they're doing. There needs to be some kind of thing where you say to defenders, just don't grab them at all. But, you know, you're always running a risk. So, look, if that gets given against Liverpool, I don't think they can massively complain. But I understand now that they're looking at, is it sustained holding? Is it, you know, for a long period of time? I can understand why it's not given. But I agree with you. I still don't understand the Watkins-Konate thing because I don't understand what he signalled for. It was a very strange incident.
Well, he gave a free kick against Watkins, didn't he?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it must have been for simulation.
But then you got to book him.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to book him. He actually looked like he was doing a swan dive.
Yeah, it was very odd. But I thought this was a really good example of, I mentioned it earlier, the old and the new with Liverpool. I think some of the counter-attacks are pure Klopp in terms of what they're used to doing, turning defence into attack really, really quickly. They've got so much pace, so many options. Salah, when he's in free flow like that, is unstoppable. But what you also have is this patience now and this ability to wait for the right moment, to actually take a collective breather. I think in so many games under Klopp, who is incredible, you'll never find me having a go at Jurgen Klopp, as you know. But two end-to-end, two basketball, and then you're a bit knackered in the vital moments. But I think if you have a bit more patience, a bit more possession, and he did have spells, Klopp, where he did that, where he, you know, took the fury and the fire out of the game. But I think Slot's taken that even further, and I think they do look quite controlled in games. But that's not to say they didn't give up chances.
So is that what you call rest defence, is it? It's sort of resting with the ball at your feet and just sucking up a little bit of energy and getting ready to go again. I mean, there have been times in games, Kev, where they've looked a little bit dozy and sort of switched off, almost as if they've sort of rested a little bit too much. But they've got away with it so far.
Yeah, I think that's the adjustment period. But I do think actually, whereas that's an interesting look at rest defence, just having a general rest as a team, I do think they look... It is about, and Arteta's very good at this actually at Arsenal. When you lose the ball, are you in the right position? Are you going to be able to guard against those counter-attacks? And it feels like they are. It feels like Trent Alexander-Arnold isn't as exposed as he has been in previous games. He, has a bit more backup in the structure. They're not perfect. Kelleher had to make a couple of really important saves. I thought Villa had spells where they played well and looked a real threat on the counter. But they're finding a way. I mean, you could pick through loads of the wins that Liverpool have had and say, well, if the opposition had been a bit more clinical, it might not have gone that way. You just ride that wave sometimes. And I think it will give them such confidence, such belief in what the manager wants, head coach, I should say these days, that, I think they're really in the right direction. Not perfect, not, as nailed on as some people think as title favourites may be, but absolutely in a better position than I thought they'd be at this stage.
Brighton beat Manchester City by 2-1. They're certainly not in a good moment. How can it be that City are having their worst run under Pep Guardiola, yet still be the greatest threat to Liverpool, Crook?
I think based on course and distance form. They know what it takes to win titles. They know what it takes to come from off the pace. They've done that a couple of times in recent years. But you're right, they're not in a great place. Again, I thought they played well in the first half, as they did in Lisbon. But Fabian Hertzler made some tactical tweaks in the second half, and that really gave Brighton the initiative. And once they scored the first goal, it almost felt inevitable that the second would follow. I still think Guardiola has some questions to answer. I don't understand why Matheus Nunes is getting as many minutes, because I just don't think he's up to the standard. And you've got Nathan Ake and Manuel Akanji on the bench, and he picks a kid as part of his defensive line away from home against Brighton. I think a lot of managers would have got a lot of stick for that.
Interesting, isn't it, that their win percentage without Rodri dips like the stock market after the latest leadership election? But shouldn't they have adapted the way they play now, Crook, in order to manage that? It shouldn't that be within Pep Guardiola's grasp? I mean, he usually comes up with a solution to whatever problem is thrown his way. Why is it such a difficult thing to do?
Probably because, unlike Spain, they've not got Zubamendi to come on and replace him. But again, you
have to adapt the way you play. Don't you have to do something different?
But maybe that backs up the point you were making earlier, that some managers are just too wedded to styles. I just think when I look at City, the squad doesn't strike fear into me like it has in the past. They haven't replaced Julian Alvarez, which means Haaland has to play every minute of every game. I've mentioned Nunez already. Obviously, Jack Grealish is still struggling with injury issues. Kyle Walker suddenly looks like a veteran fullback, and I think it's inevitable that he'll go to pastures new at the end of the season. So I think this could just be one season too far as Manchester City are concerned. Gundogan doesn't look the same player as he was when he left.
Fabian Hertzler has beaten Manchester United, beaten Manchester City, got a point against Arsenal and given Liverpool a scare. How impressed are you with the way that he has adapted to the Premier League, Kev?
Really impressed, but not massively surprised, in the sense that this is a really smart guy. I mean, you look at what he did with St. Pauli last season. They got promoted from the German second tier and nobody saw that coming. And the way he did it was to make them so good without the ball. So he was able to really maximise what he had there. You've seen games, for example, that crazy game against Chelsea, where the line is so high defensively, but he'll always take risks. And I think the players seem to be on board with what he wants. It's really quite something when you have a guy of that age who can bring guys along with him. Julian Nagelsmann had it, still has it. And there are similarities for me in the way that Hutzler attacks things. And I think the way that they were so relentless in that second half really is testament to the quality that they have. And also, I think João Pedro made such a difference. I mean, he's an unbelievable player. I think he's still got room to develop, still got room to grow, but there is something really magical about him. Affects the game constantly. I think he's a top player, and I think he's going to be one of the best in the Premier League in the next few years because he's an impact player of the best sort. So yeah, they're in a really good place right now, I think.
Yeah, and he was always a talent when he was brought in by Watford, and he was a little baby-faced boy at the time, and he still made impacts without necessarily sustained consistency. But, he's certainly delivering now at Brighton with more regularity. I know he's been injured recently, but also like some of the other older players have performed so well. Danny Welbeck has played so well under Fabian Hürzeler, and they've got strength in depth now. At the weekend, they were without Solly March, Lewis Dunk, Yakumba Minte, Milner, Kadiolu, who's come in as well. All of those players are going to come back. I think that they will achieve European football in some guys. I, as Crook knows, have had a bet on them to reach the top 4 this season. I did that at the beginning of the season, but that's probably going to be a bridge too far. They might not get there, but they'll give it a good goal between now and the end of the season, I think.
Well, they've had games at home where they've dropped points and you wouldn't expect them to. 2-0 up against Wolves, drew at home to Forest, which on Forest's current form isn't a terrible result. 0-0 at home to Ipswich when they battered them for 45 minutes. Imagine if they had those 6 points on the board. We'd be talking about them not just in terms of top 4, but maybe dark horses for the title.
Across Manchester, Ruben Amorim starts work in the international break, although he can't get on the grass immediately because of a visa issue. He has a to-do list that is lengthening. Do you keep Ruud van Nistelrooy? How do you get to get the best out of Rashford and Højlund, who didn't have a very good game at the weekend? How do you implement a playing style that he craves with the current personnel you've got? How do you rebuild Alejandro Garnacho's fragile confidence? And how do you ensure that you get the best out of Amad Diallo, because he was absolutely superb in the last 2 games, Crook?
Well, the Amad one's simple. Just pick him, which Ten Hag didn't do often enough, because I think he is...
Which is a mistake.
He's the best wide player at the moment. You look at Garnacho, I think there's a lot of raw materials to work with there. It was a brilliant goal that he scored. I was slightly disappointed to hear that the incident with that YouTuber had affected his mentality. I think he needs to be a little bit stronger to that, to stand up to criticism and silence those critics. Rashford is a million miles away from it at the moment, and I think he's got a big issue, because I don't think Ruben Amorim will tolerate him with those type of performances in the way that other managers have. You're right about Rasmus Højlund. He just doesn't look like he's at the level required for Manchester United to be serious top 4 contenders. Defensively, I think they've been all right this season, apart from a couple of high-profile examples at home. So there's foundations there. Ugarte is getting stronger with every game. And Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes are playing with a newfound freedom that wasn't there under Erik ten Hag. So there's positives he can work with, but obviously there's big issues. Van Nistelrooy is a fascinating situation. I think I'm right in saying he's got the best win percentage of any Manchester United manager ever, albeit he's only had 4 games, 3 of them very winnable, but he really got into the souls of supporters. Just the way that Amorim was speaking in his press conference yesterday, I wonder if there might be a role for him. I thought he'd probably go, but I don't know, Amorim's just clouded my thinking on that a little bit.
Troy Deeney says that he shouldn't keep him because they're starting anew and afresh, and it should just be clean slate. But interesting to see what happens. It's difficult as well, because with Ruud in the background, if things don't go well for Ruben Amorim, every time something, they go on a bad run of results, everyone will go, "Where's Ruud? Where's Ruud?" And that's the last thing that he needs. Right, okay, let's move on to other big stories. So international break, El Sakiko went Gary O'Neill's way. Does that mean he is safe for now, Crook?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as we reported last week, the board wanted to give him more time. They were aware that the supporters, a lot of them had sort of turned on the manager, which always puts you in a precarious position. But it was an important win for them, and a brilliant second goal from Matheus Cunha, although I felt sorry for Russell Martin because a couple of big decisions went against him.
Julian Lopetegui is out of his depth. Discuss, Kev.
I don't think he's out of his depth. I'm not a big fan of his, as you know. I don't think it's necessarily that he's out of his depth, but I just think he's the wrong choice, and the message isn't getting through. I think you needed a much more attack-minded coach after Moyes. If you were going to make a big change, why would you bring in somebody who's safety first? And it just isn't working.
Why
they
can't he
look
get his
fragile.
message across?
Yeah, it's a strange one because he has had success elsewhere. He's done well with Sevilla and he won the Europa League. He
Yeah,
did
has
well with
he? Has
Wolves
he
for a
really?
while. No, it's not the sparkling CV some would have you believe. The way his Spain tenure ended when he spoke to Real Madrid behind the Federation's back, that was a really bad black mark against him. Sevilla, yes, he wins the trophy, does well with them. But I just think he's not the elite coach some make him out to be. The way he flounced out of Wolves, I know that he might have thought, yeah. I think there are a lot that you look and you think, is he that elite coach? And he's really floundering at the moment because that squad is strong. There's real quality in that squad. I thought they bought really well in the summer. I think Steiten's doing a really good job. They spent a load of money. That should be good enough to get much better results. And just doesn't quite have that. He might have it behind closed doors, but I think when he speaks to the media, doesn't quite have that gravitas, I don't think, that you would want from somebody of his experience. So I think he's floundering. I think they should make a change. Whether they do, we'll see.
He keeps saying, in a couple of months we'll be fine. Well, I don't think you really get a couple of months in the Premier League. It doesn't really work like that. And yeah, they spent a hell of a lot of money, and I think they should be performing better. And he is falling out with players as well. That we know. What about Crystal Palace? Because they've won once all season as well. And Oliver Glasner was under pressure a couple of weeks ago. Is that still the case, Crook?
Again, I think Steve Parish wants to give him time. Obviously, having turned down a lucrative offer from Bayern Munich in the summer, it'd be quite a bad look if they were then forced to pay him off a few months later. They had injuries at the weekend, but I still think that the team lineup was a bit odd with Mark Gay playing in midfield. Obviously, Joachim Andersen rubbed salt in the wounds with a really good performance, and our understanding is that it was Glasner who wanted to sell him to bring in Maxence Lacroix. That decision hasn't really worked out. So I think he's still under the pump. I guess what's saving him at the moment is the fact that Southampton look already destined for the Championship. Leicester, I think, are going to be right down there as well. And then you've got Ipswich. But I do wonder with all these managers if that Ipswich win just might spook one or two owners over the course of this international break.
Yeah, it's all got a little bit closer than it was down at the bottom of the table. And of course, there's quite a few just sort of sitting on the sidelines, looking rather flirtatiously at a few owners. I noticed that Graham Potter had another glow up and then went into the Sky Studios at the weekend. David Moyes, his name keeps getting bounded around. He's actually coming to do a commentary with us in a couple of weeks, which I'm very much looking forward to. And you've got, Jose Mourinho can't stop talking about the fact that he wants to come back to the Premier League. So actually, someone said to me, "Would you take Jose Mourinho at West Ham? Would you say that would be a good move?" And I was like, "No, because he only ever wants." Listen, I love him. He is the best for me. He's given Chelsea more success than any other manager. But nowadays, he's a different guy. He is there just for the clicks and likes. He's basically the Football Manager version of Crook, isn't he? Right, he'll just say whatever it takes just to become popular on Twitter. Let's finish with a couple of positives. We should mention Fulham, who could have even more points than they've got. And Crook was talking about Brighton, who could be further up the table. Actually, Fulham really should have more points on the board. And Newcastle now, who are quietly putting a few points on the table as well, because they're 1 point off third. Kev?
Yeah, I think Newcastle are showing their quality, and I think they look better without the ball, which is really important for them, because if you look at when they qualified for the Champions League, that was all about their out-of-possession play to a large extent. Fulham, I love watching. I feel like Marco Silva, win, lose or draw, always comes out and says, we made lots of chances, we should have won the game.
We said about Ange Postecoglou, how he doesn't ever speak to you and he looks at the floor and he's like not interested, and you can ask him 7 questions and you might just get 90 seconds out of him. Well, he's the other way, Marco Silva.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Marco, what did you think of today's game? And then about 30 minutes later, you're like, thanks.
Yeah. After he's told you that they should have won the Champions League that afternoon, they should have won the World Cup.
I like him.
I do as well. I like him very much. I think he's a brilliant coach, actually. Really, really smart guy.
Really
and I talked about Smith Rowe earlier. There's an example of if you build a team around a guy, if you have the luxury to do that, if you build a team around a guy, put your arm around him, tell him he's so important to the team, that's what you get out of him. A club like Arsenal, you might not be able to do that because you're not going to get those minutes all the time. He's not past Ødegaard, but at Fulham, he's the main man. He is a wonderful footballer. Really, really good player. And I think what we're seeing now is that team built around him.
Congratulations to Nuno Espirito Santo, the first Nottingham Forest manager to win the Premier League Manager of the Month since our very own Stuart Pearce back in January 1997. Pearce, who made the headlines a couple of times this week because also he was the last Manchester City manager to lose 4 in a row. I didn't mention that on air. I did mention it while we were having dinner, and he said to me, 4, that's nothing. I actually lost 10 in a row. Right, have a good international break, boys.
Thank you very much.
See you later, Crookie. Fly safe. We'll see you soon. We'll be back later in the week when we preview. Are we going to preview the England game or review the England game? I suppose that will depend on when we record it. We will be around before the end of the week, and we'll be back next Monday as well to review all of the action as well. So we'll try and get one out on Wednesday for you to preview the England game against Greece, which is a big one.